Yeah, so a couple of people have made that observation that it's like working in a foreign country,
Yeah.
working in Pittsburgh.
It gives a lot of freedom.
And well, yeah, in addition to freedom, it gives you a different perspective. You're not so much a victim of trends, of popular thinking, of, what's in the state-of-the-art head right now.
This is a scene from Night of the Living Dead, a low-budget film co-authored, directed, photographed, and edited by George Romero in 1968. Already the head of a successful commercial production house in Pittsburgh, this was his first venture into feature filmmaking. Its flaws were mainly budgetary, while its virtues were clearly visionary, earning it popular success as a horror film and a cult following for exploratory uses of genre and technique. Style is difficult to define, but even in this disembodied clip, the technical aspects of Romero's style are making themselves apparent. They're in his cutting, his camera angles, in his two-dimensional design within the film frame. Great spatial movements from shot to shot, and even within shots. Just making films in Pittsburgh for 10 years has become a sort of stylistic statement. In January of '78, Romero and his producer, Richard Rubinstein, allowed a film crew from the School of Visual Arts onto the set of their latest production, the second part of the Dead trilogy, Dawn of the Dead. Using footage shot over one long weekend, a documentary took shape, focusing first on the filmmaking process and secondly on directorial vision. What part of it reaches the screen unhampered? What external forces affected? But first, let's introduce our cast. In pre-production, George Romero, screenwriter. Richard Rubinstein, producer. In production, George Romero, directing. Richard Rubinstein, producing. Michael Gornick, cinematographer. Carl Augenstein, lighting director. Tom Savini, creator of special makeup, actor and stuntman. Ken Foray, actor. Scott Reiniger, actor. David Emge, actor. John Amplis, actor in Martin and casting director of Dawn. And in post-production, editing the film. Pre-production involves writing the screenplay, raising the money, and organizing the shoot. You can see from the final page of the Dawn screenplay, Romero's use of the form is unorthodox, in a medium where one page generally equals 1 minute of film.
The script seems long. Did you plan to shoot it all? I mean, giving yourself leeway in the cutting to...
Pretty much, yeah. I usually write long scripts. Martin was a long script that was really a long script. I mean, and the first cut came out at almost 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Wow.
This is a long script that seems long. It's not really long. There's so much description, and if you read those pages, there's so much action described in great paragraphs where I got carried away, describing the action itself. And some of those things take a second and a half, And it's not cutting that long. I cut the first half of the film and it came in at 45 minutes. So I think the first cut will probably be about a 2-hour cut, which is not bad for a first cut.
To what extent do other influences creep into a work, and at what stage?
A lot of people often compare you to Hitchcock, but you don't buy that. How come?
They have some nerve. No, I don't. Well, filmmaking is funny. Filmmakers, all artists, I guess, to some extent, are parasitic of what they've seen, and what they are basically imitating, what attracted them in the first place. Filmmakers, maybe more than any other form. I mean, it's not like you can sit down with a pencil and do your thing, or a canvas, or whatever. It's very expensive, and very few people get enough chance to work with the hardware, and get enough chance to really develop a style, or except on a very intellectual level. That's why, unfortunately, the state of the art has somewhat gone towards menus and pre-planning and everything else, which is a little bit destructive. I would say that if I'm parasitic of anybody, it's more Wells and some of the early, like Howard Hawks and people like that. Those are the films that really affected me. There are certain Hitchcockian things that are, first of all, I don't consciously, when I'm setting up a shot, say, wow, remember that shot? And then try to imitate that. There are Hitchcock-type influences. I think the sequence in the cemetery in Night of the Living Dead, where you see the figure way in the background and you don't really know what it is, and then it gradually gets worked into the plot. It starts to become a threat, and then the threat is a real threat. That's kind of a Hitchcockian sequence. Hey, I mean, praying's for church, huh? Come on.
I haven't seen you in church lately.
Well, there's not much sense in my going to church. Do you remember one time when we were small, we were out here? It was from right over there. I jumped out at you from behind the tree, and Grandpa got all excited, and he shook his fist at me, and he said, "Boy, you'll be damned to hell." Remember that? Right over there. Well, you used to really be scared here.
Johnny,
You're still afraid.
stop it now. I mean it.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it. You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it. You're acting like a child.
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
He'll hear you.
Here he comes now. I'm getting out of here.
Johnny.
A couple of pieces that I've seen written about Night of the Living Dead say that it takes us back to silent cinema storytelling.
Oh! No! Oh! Johnny! Help me!
I can see now a couple of specific things in a couple of my films that are Hitchcockian in that way. Sometimes people say it because of the plot lines being, there are certain ironies in the plots that I use. I don't think that has anything to do with form. I think that's more a content association that people are making. The Thing was the movie that knocked me down when I was a kid. That's the one, I think, horror film, everyone says, what attracts you to the genre? And it was probably The Thing. I was the right age at exactly the right time, and it had exactly the right effect on me. I never forgot it.
The scenographics of The Thing and those of Night and Dawn are remarkably similar. Confined spaces within which groups of protagonists are eternally on guard.
Too soon, not wanting to compromise from ground zero. Eventually we may have to make some compromises on a business level, but at least they start later.
Right.
And we finish the picture, so it's a matter of maybe taking something out.
This statement was made during production and carried with it an ominous note which reverberated for over a year as Romero fought for his version of the film, a strong vision that stood as a thorn in the side of negotiations with distributors, even after Dawn opened to tremendous business in Europe. Finally, a breakthrough was achieved.
We made a couple of errors in signing the distribution deal with Night of the Living Dead, in that we sold or we signed a distribution deal worldwide. We didn't hold out any rights. Television, Canada, Europe, nothing. 16 millimeter, nothing. We gave the distributor the world. Basically, I didn't know anything then about the business side of things and about how to draw a contract. Now, knowing what I know now, you want to ask for as many of those controls as you can possibly get your hands on. If you have a smash hit film out in theaters, your 16 millimeter rights are going to be worth a lot. Your television rights are going to be worth a lot.
Right.
So, principally, I would say that. Hold out for as much as you can hold out for.
There were a number of people that offered us substantial amounts of money to deliver an R-rated film, which meant we anticipated cutting the guts out of the movie in order to get that R. We looked for a distributor who recognized, as we did, that the best economic course of action was to leave the film untampered, even though that created other problems. It created the potential problem of a newspaper not taking the ad. It created the problem of a TV station not running a commercial, a certain theater not playing the film. We believe that ultimately, economically, those problems would cost less and we would make more if the film was left as George wanted it.
Several of the distributors that wanted it badly, understanding the problems, for example, with the MPAA here in this country, that the MPAA would probably X the film, and the only way to get an R would be to cut it. So I wound up holding out during the negotiations, and luckily, Richard backed me up all the way on this, because there were a couple of times when it would have been easier to take a deal. Would have been financially easier to take a deal.
Right.
And that's the other thing. I think that Richard and I have had a good relationship that way. So, I don't have to worry about my own internal team. That's big, number one. But having Richard's support, I was just able to sit there and say, look, I'm not going to cut the picture. When the distributor took his stance to put the picture out unrated, it's not that he wasn't accepting the restrictions of an X, because he's putting a flag on it that says that no one under 17 will be admitted. Forget with a parent, not at all. He's accepting those restrictions. What he's not accepting is the symbol itself, the X, because the X does automatically say to most people in America that this picture is obscene.
For a major company in the industry to release a film without a rating is a major break. And that was something that was long and hard in finding. We basically are in agreement with a system which flags movies and tells people what they're going to see. Our point is there should not be economic penalties attached to that.
But then I also had to fight, and you always have to fight for things like length. Usually with an exploitation picture, a distributor will say, it's terrific and I love it, but cut it to 90 minutes. Once again, there's no secret. I can't teach you how to get the kind of controls that enable you to leave your picture longer or to have that kind of creative cut. It's a matter of just holding out for it and not selling until somebody gives it to you. And I was able to do that partially because of my reputation, but partially just because I sat there and said no.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of sticky times when people would get up from the negotiating table and walk and go home. And you got to sit through, and those are the toughest times. You got to just sit through that and say, okay, we'll see you tomorrow, hopefully. And we did see him tomorrow, and they ultimately said, okay, it can be your cut.
Let me give you something on audio you might want to use.
Yes,
Let me
okay, keep it going.
Just roll for a second.
Great.
I think that there are very few directors that have total, final, real last cut on their movies. I say that when they tell you that these are the rules for the system and you can't do it another way, they're not correct. It can be done other ways. You can maintain control of your product. I'm not saying it's easy, but it can be done. You don't have to be in New York or Hollywood in order to produce films, to get attention. Okay, I think we're the proof of that, and I would be as encouraging as possible to people to do what everybody else says you can't do.
and Dead's the beginning, and this is the end.
This is the middle.
This is the middle of it. Room for more?
There's plenty of room for more.
Okay.
Zombies are still dumb.
Great.